But to keep the program going, I would like to invite Daniel Mays back to the stage for his second talk of the day. It's going to be more nuts and bolts and nitty-gritty details. So thank you, Daniel. This works. This is the pointy end.
All right. Can we all just take like a stretch? This is like a lot of sitting, listening. After lunch, lights are dim. All right, I'll try not to put you to sleep too much, hopefully. So my first presentation was kind of like the nuts and bolts of like getting that canvas stretched, like I was talking about. So hopefully this is the exciting part where we get to like just build up from that and really try to maximize those principles of soil health. So I call this next level no-till. Here we go. So just, you can remember this. This is the overview of the farm. Skip on right back that. These principles: photosynthesis, a diverse community, soil coverage, and minimal disturbance. These are, I guess you can draw that into 5. I guess you'd call like animals, separate that out from diversity, but these are the principles we're really trying to maximize on the farm. Trying to come up with all the creative ways to do that. So again, here's the 101 that we established, hopefully, of like, this is the bare minimum of soil coverage. There's not really photosynthesis happening there, but at least the soil is fully covered, and it's this wonderful base to be able to plant and manage really easily because we have no weeds, and we have all the soil health benefits of keeping it covered with organic material. So building on that, these are the strategies I'm going to talk about that we use at Frith Farm. Cover cropping, obvious one. Doing that at a human scale without tillage is a little less obvious, but just as fun. Integrating animals. Multi-cropping, sometimes called interplanting or companion planting, adding more diversity within the cash crops we grow. Incorporating perennials into and around the fields. And then I'm going to wrap up by talking about how I personally measure success, that elusive term. I think I sort of alluded to it. It's beyond profit, right? There's more to success in life than money. So jumping right in, here's some no-till cover cropping scenarios. I'm trying to keep it real simple to get through it. So one, peas and oats, they're a good like gateway cover crop because they're real easy to plant and manage. They can go in anywhere in the fall where next year's early spring crops are going because they die reliably in the winter. I think that's probably true in this climate as well as where I am in Maine. Or you can do them in the spring before sort of midsummer planted crops. Simple scenario. Second would be rye and crimson clover. Rye is often paired with vetch. Vetch is a little trickier to manage within no-till. So I'm just starting to experiment with it. I've been kind of scared of vetch with its rhizomatous, perennial nature. So these rye and crimson clover, rye will overwinter. I think it's hardy down to -40. So we do those on beds that will not be planted again until the following summer so that we allow it to regrow and really capitalize on all that photosynthesis that rye provides. It's an amazing workhorse cover crop that photosynthesizes all winter. And then, third scenario for the summer, sorghum Sudan grass is a great heat-loving biomass producer. And those are on beds that we're going to take that we take out of cash crop production. So that is a sacrifice for the long-term benefit of soil health. So here's the same thing in pictures. Here's peas and oats, in this case planted in the spring. We plant them with a earthway seeder, so direct seeded. Again, we treat cover crops just like cash crops. So we seed them the same way, irrigate them the same way, weed them the same way. We don't really have many weeds, but we do look for weeds within them. They're built into the crop plan with just as much care and intention as a cash crop. They're not an afterthought. So yeah, this is peas and oats spring planted. This is when they want to be terminated, when they're sort of in peak flower. Very easy to terminate at that point. If you grow them in the fall, you don't even need to terminate them because the winter does that for you. So we used to flail mow them, the flail mower attachment on the BCS walking tractor. And you can see that first bed's been flail mowed, just sort of chopped up and left on the surface. That's great, it doesn't disturb the soil, but it's still a pretty big disturbance. It chops it all up real fine. Whatever insects are in there are probably getting chopped up too. So we're always looking for lower disturbance methods. And also for less, mechanized, less combustion dependent, more human scale methods. So this was our innovation. Part of the great thing about having a big crew is that they innovate. Everybody's got ideas, and this was an innovation that the crew came up with one year. This is a human scale roller. Maybe not the most efficient. Feedback was you should wear your rain gear, otherwise you get kind of itchy. You get a little dizzy by the end of the bed, but now we don't do that too often, although every year the crew likes to try it out, but we mostly just stomp it down with a homemade crimper, which I'll show you later, and then pull tarps over it. So tarp it for a week or so, depending on the weather. If it's warmer out, it only takes a couple days to just kind of heat up and kill that cover crop. And it does that so easily because that cover crop was at its peak stage where it kind of wants to die anyway. So we do wait for that timing. And then the tarps come off, and this is what it looks like. It's this grown in place straw mulch. That's the pea and oat chaff, which we could just transplant through if we're transplanting. In this case, we're direct seeding, so we raked it off into the path. And that is those same beds, which we then direct seed with the earthway seeder. This was storage radishes, daikons, watermelon, black Spanish radishes. We pulled maybe like a dozen weeds from those beds. And then this was the crop in the fall. We actually weighed it. We got over 500 pounds of grade A roots from each bed. That system involved no inputs other than cover crop seed and human power, right? There was no fertilizer there either. Looking at rye and clover, this is a little harder to manage, but also just produces so much more biomass. Rye is just an awesome workhorse. So definitely encourage trying to tame that workhorse, that stallion, into working for you. So here is seeding in the fall. For us, I try to seed by the end of September. Once we're into October, it's kind of too late to guarantee a good stand that will survive the winter. So October 1st is kind of my cutoff. This year, of course, would have been fine, probably 2 weeks later, but that's an anomaly. We seed, like I said, just like a cash crop, earthway seeder. You see the irrigation set up so we can water it in. And there it is, established. We irrigate and weed it just like any other crop. And then, the next year it regrows, and around June 1st, it's, in its flowering stage. The base of the stalks are starting to look brown. That's when we know it's ready to be knocked down. We do not try to terminate it before then. That's a common challenge I think people do, is they want to plant earlier, So they try to terminate it when it's in its peak growth stage, and it really doesn't want to die. Then you're fighting it. All that energy it has in its roots, you're just kind of fighting and fighting all that potential photosynthesis that it wants to give you. So if you want to plant earlier, do a fall cover crop, a winter killed cover crop that then you can plant early, but save the rye to really let it do its thing, and then plant in early summer, not spring as much. So yeah, we knocked that down. There's the, I can't really see it. Maybe I have a better picture coming up, but it's basically just a T-post clamped to a 2x4 with some rope to hold on either end, and two people stomp on it in unison. So the T-post acts as the crimping blade, that edge of the T-post, and just every foot or so stomp down, and it crimps and knocks down the rye. So that was our $5 on-farm innovation tool that I think now Johnny's is going to actually make a version of that's more than $5, I'm sure. So yeah, then we drag tarps on just to make sure that rye is fully dead. I think even with two people stomping in unison, it probably is not crimping enough to fully kill the rye everywhere. So we do tarp to ensure that full termination and no regrowth of the rye. Yeah, we use concrete blocks to secure the tarps. They weigh like 16 pounds a block and are nicely square, so you can stack them on a pallet. You can carry 2 in each hand if you're feeling energetic for the day, and that really helps keep the tarps from blowing away. I'm not a fan of sandbags as much because they UV degrade, they grow weeds if you fill them with soil, and they don't stack as well. You can't carry them as easily. Yeah, and I just wanted to point out here, really highlighting the power of the rye. This rye was over 6 feet tall, lignified, huge amount of biomass at this time. And there's the peas and oats that we planted as early as we could in the spring, and it's like ankle height, very shallow root system still. So just the difference in biomass production of those two, if you can get the rye established in the fall and grow all winter, that's so much more soil health being generated than waiting till spring to plant a spring cover crop. So the tarps come off, and here's the grown in place rye straw mulch. We do knock it down all in the same direction for ease of dragging the tarp on. And then, it's this sort of nicely oriented straw that we plant directly through. So we transplant into it. It does take a little longer to transplant into because of that dense root mass, but that dense root mass is also what's so beautiful about it. So we take that with joy. And we got to use a measuring tape instead of, our rolling dibble that usually marks our spacing. Sometimes if the root mass is dense enough, we'll actually use a broad fork turned parallel to the bed as a dibbler and kind of use the tine spacing. The tines are spaced every 4 inches, so we can do multiples of 4-inch spacing and have that sort of loosen the root mass for us. These are the transplants once established. I think these were storage cabbage. There they are later in the fall. Again, very little weed pressure because not only do we have that rye mulch grown in place, but beneath that we have our compost layer. So it's like a double layer of mulch. So basically no weeds. Here's just a quick photo of that same summer cover crop. This is sorghum Sudan. That's 10 feet tall. That's a huge amount of biomass. Probably even more than the rye can produce. So it's pretty hard with our short season to give up summer growing time of cash crops. But I actually like this. The summer cover crops are always my favorite thing growing on the farm in the summer because it's just like such a jungle, so much production there. And then that all winter kills and is mostly knocked down by the snow for like a super thick mulch to plant through the next year. But if it's not all the way knocked down, we can flail mow whatever remains, sticking up in the way the next spring. So yeah, there it is seeded again. That's the summer cover crop. So starting with this nice weed-free, foundation. So here's some cocktails to make it a little more interesting. Forgive my boredom making these slides and the names I gave these. We have the winter sour, which is, oats, barley, peas, fava beans, tillage radish, crimson clover. All of these will winter kill in our climate. The one thing I'd note is if your spring crop is going to be in the brassica family, maybe take out the tillage radish so that you're not going back-to-back brassicas, and because that will be habitat for flea beetles to come right up under your row cover if you're growing brassicas. And we have the summer soiler maker, the sorghum Sudan, sun hemp, cowpeas. Sweet alyssum is a nice sort of understory flowering plant. All those are really heat-loving biomass producers, nitrogen fixers, sun hemp and cowpeas. And then the overwintery mix is, winter rye, barley, Austrian winter peas, red clover. Barley will typically winter kill for us, but that's also okay to mix and match these mixes. Like the barley will winter kill, but then everything else will just fill in and feed off of its decay in the spring. So not necessarily a bad thing. I'll say you can also put a winter, hardy understory like clover in the summer mix. That then when everything else dies with the first frost, that clover will take over and keep it green all winter long. That's what we now do for summer mixes. So here they are in pictures. Here's the fall mix. You can kind of see there oats, barley, fava, winter peas, clover. Yeah, I think I see those all. Here's the summer mix. Sorghum Sudan, sun hemp, cowpeas, and you can see the clover in the understory. This is this year, so at this point, everything's brown above, a foot tall, but then all that clover is still lush green, photosynthesizing. And it was just kind of hanging out in the understory, but now's its time to shine. Here's the rye and clover in the fall. And then, talking about integrating livestock is such a great way to just stack your enterprises symbiotically. So, you can produce crops better and produce livestock better by growing them together. So it's a win-win. It adds diversity. There's that magic that happens in an animal's gut when it, takes in the plants and puts them back into the land. Like that partnership is magical. So fostering that is wonderful. Activates soil biology. It can spread nutrients. This is actually a great way to fertilize, is to run poultry over your cover crops, since you're typically feeding them, so that feed can be your fertilizer. And you can actually, calculate the application rates based on how much feed you're feeding them. Rather than mowing with equipment, you can mow biologically. And just a great way to diversify your markets and revenue. And this one is not a small one. When you're doing direct-to-consumer marketing, animals, they sell your stuff. People will, come from afar just to have their kids be able to, look at a baby sheep or whatever. That can be a great marketing thing to do too. So here's when we had sheep. This is grazing, looks like a fall cover crop, peas and oats. And the animals love it. It's amazing to see them tapping into all that fertility and soil life that's in these beds that we've, put so much care into. They love it. This is our egg mobile. We had 600 layers, and we rotated those around the perimeter of the fields. Layers are not great with no-till. They haven't drunk the Kool-Aid yet. They really like to till with their feet. So if they do pass over vegetable beds, you got to do it with a dense cover crop, and you got to do it, for a short period of time. Meat poultry are much better no-till practitioners. So yeah, we do rotate turkeys, or did when we raised them, over the cover crop. Especially, we just raised turkeys for Thanksgiving, which I will say is a wonderful niche market. Americans tend to pay anything for a locally raised turkey. So yeah, raising them in time for Thanksgiving was perfect timing to rotate them all over all the fall and winter planted cover crops. This is a particular great combination. I call it turkey on rye. And this is after they've moved off. So again, we're not trying to graze it right down to the ground. We're trying to hit it hard and quickly, graze it, fertilize it, and then move them on so that the cover crop can bounce back. And it bounces back hard with all that turkey poop on there. The rye just soaks that right up. And then the turkeys move back to the perimeter. We have pasture around the entire perimeter, so it's almost like a wheel, and then they can go in on the spokes to any plot on the farm as needed. Here they are again, just because I love turkeys on cover crop. Yeah, this is next year's fertility. So this plot, this is all the fertility that plot will need for the next year, because it has cover crop that's being fertilized and biologically activated by the turkeys. So here's this other animal that we can integrate into the farm called humans. I really believe in this. We are a part of the soil food web. Yeah, we add life and diversity to the land just like livestock or any other animal. Even if we're not, adding our manure to it, there's still something about our presence on the land that I think makes it more complete. And here's a question for you. Is there any path to sustainability that does not include the reintegration of humans into biologically productive landscapes? I challenge you to think of an example of a sustainable future that does not include that. And if we buy that, then how are we going to integrate humans back onto the land? I think farming is an obvious way to do that. So here's us doing that. That's my first son showing us how to appreciate a buckwheat flower. That's in a summer cover crop mix. And this is what the farm looks like, pretty much every day. We have a crew of 9, and we're just constantly moving over the land and tweaking it, appreciating it, and pulling, sustenance from it. So interplanting, sometimes called multi-cropping, companion planting. This adds diversity, adds more photosynthesis, adds soil coverage. Plants, have different ways of growing, different microbes they partner with underground, different root profiles. So to the extent you're just growing a single crop in one place, you're not maximizing the photosynthesis that's possible there, and the feeding of the soil life that's possible there, because that's what photosynthesis is, right? So yeah, here's some examples from the farm. We used to just do tomatoes outdoors, one row down the middle of the bed, and then we just mulch everything else, all the ground under it. And then I quickly realized, well, geez, that's a really missed opportunity for more photosynthesis, also for more revenue, right? Because here we have beets planted on the shoulder, sweet alyssum planted down the middle between the tomatoes. I love sweet alyssum as a beneficials plant. Seed is really cheap. It flowers all season long, and has really small open flowers, so that it feeds the insects with small mouthpieces that can't go very deep in the flowers. So one such insect is the braconid wasp, which is the parasitic wasp that parasitizes tomato hornworms. So this is like a feel-good combination here, that we're attracting the beneficial predators of the potential pest for this crop. It also is just a beautiful, right? It's like a nice place to work. This is the basil with the tomatoes. There is a path down the middle of that. It's hard to see. So everything in the brassica and beet family, which is a lot of the crops vegetable farmers grow, is actually non-mycorrhizal, meaning it doesn't form mycorrhizal fungus connections. Most plants do. I think 95% of all terrestrial plants form connections with mycorrhizal fungus. But those have evolved and been bred to not. So they thrive in, that's why they thrive partly in tillage-based systems, because they're much more bacterial in their partnerships underground. But that means that if we grow a plot of nothing but brassicas or nothing but, chinopods, beets, spinach, whatever, we're actually kind of starving out that mycorrhizal network. So one way to keep feeding the fungus in the soil is to undersow those with something that is mycorrhizal, in this case, clover. I think this is a mix of red and white clover. So here's Brussels sprouts planted into crimped rye, and then we do a strip of lettuce heads down the middle to make use of that middle space that the Brussels sprouts don't need till later in the season. Shoulders of tomatoes is an obvious place to fit in more photosynthesis. This is celery next to tomatoes. And then these are cucumbers with salad turnips and bok choy at the base. This is during the heat of summer, so it's actually a little cooler. It's partially shaded under those plants, so you can actually make use of that indoor, normally too hot, high tunnel space, but grow more cool weather crops in the summer. This is one of my favorite combinations. Does anyone know what two crops those are? Carrots, yep, we got carrots, that's the easy one. Anyone else? Another one, a fun one, it's a tropical crop. It's ginger. So we grow carrots and ginger at the same time. Makes a nice soup right there growing. But the carrots, ginger is really slow growing at first in the season. So by the time it's up like this and ready to take over the space, the carrots are ready to come out. So it's a nice combination that way. And you can play around with all these combinations. Here's some onions with radishes, more carrots on the shoulders of tomatoes, spinach next to sugar snap peas. Sweet alyssum is great because you can just undersow it everywhere. It has a very shallow root system, so it really doesn't compete with crops. It never gets more than a foot tall, so it's not going to compete above ground or below ground, and it flowers all season long. So you can just kind of go wild with that. And here's tomatoes outside, undersown to clover, so that these tomatoes are dying in the fall. They've had a frost or two, but you can see that those beds are fully photosynthesizing with clover, and that's how it still looks even now in December. And then we just cut the tomato plants out, throw them in the compost, and you have this nice cover crop bed. More examples, between perennials, these are raspberries that, are spaced 10 feet apart, but this is in their first year, so that they don't need that full 10 feet. So in the meantime, we plant, a bed of carrots between them that will come out, and then the raspberries will fill out that space next year, and the carrot beds will become the paths. I'm more and more into the perennial intercropping here. Here's a row of peach trees as one of our hedgerows in our fields. But while the peach trees were young, I figured why not plant carrots there too. So got a crop of carrots out of there. And then, good segue in the perennial plantings. This is a great way to get a diversity of roots year-round in the ground. It's almost like an underground bank of diversity that will be there all the time and can seep out into your fields. And then an above ground, attractant of all sorts of life as well, all the beneficial insects. These don't need to, these could be crops that you sell too. There could be fruit, there could be herbs, there could be, cut flowers, medicinals, and they're pretty darn nice to look at They attract a lot of customers. I think they even attract employees. And they help organize the farm. Like I was saying before, they delineate where one plot ends and the next begins. So here's one in the spring. We have these between every single plot on the farm. And the goal is really, flowering diversity all season long from early spring to late fall. So there's one in the spring, there's one in the fall. Notice we have bird houses in there too, sized for bluebirds, and field sparrows move in there too. I'll breeze through this quick because this might be different for where you are, like different species that go well in these hedgerows. But basically, there's tall shrubs. Rule of thumb is a shrub will be about as wide as it is tall. So if it lists the height as 15 feet, then you're looking at a 15-foot wide shrub as well. And these are all native to the Northeast. So I'm not sure how many would be native here. You do that research. I think there's lots of good publications out there for just look up native beneficial plantings. And then shorter shrubs, depending on how much space you want to devote. And then all the herbaceous perennials. Again, the goal for me was continuous bloom, overlapping bloom periods from early spring to late fall, so that there's just a constant nectar supply for all the different insects. And these are all the mostly native beneficial herbaceous perennials we've planted in our hedgerows. And then, native grasses as well for overwintering habitat for insects. It's kind of like a lot of what you hear from the experts of like pest management is like, get rid of all your overwintering habitat so your pests die, but like actually that's working the wrong direction. Like we want habitat for the beneficial insects that control those pests. And I will say, like, we installed all these hedgerows like 5 years ago. And now we're looking at a whole nother business enterprise that I didn't even plan on, which is we're a perennial nursery, because all of these plants can and even benefit from being split each year. So now we have root cuttings. You take a little square foot of plant and turn it into 5 root cuttings at $5 each. It's like, there's an amazing sort of business there that I didn't even plan on. And that is really popular, and that feels really good that we're like disseminating all this diversity into the community. So then there's the fun part of like every nook and cranny, just start planting, flowering things, leaving just some areas of the farm unmowed, unmanaged, and look at what life comes in there, all the wildflowers, meadow. So I really feel that soil health, we keep talking about all these metrics and ways to, measure it quantitatively, but I believe we all have within us the tools to measure it intuitively. I think you feel it if you're on a piece of land that is healthy. There's a feeling you get from that. And all these other tools are useful too, but don't let those replace that, I would say. How do we measure success? I wish I had a poll question for this one. How would you finish this sentence? Good farming is, or good regenerative, whatever term. Anybody want to call it out? Fun, beautiful, all right. Fulfilling, delicious. Hard, all right. Productive. Yeah. Spiritual, all right. You guys are way ahead of me here, all right. I would say it's ecologically and socially enriching, and I'd say it's economically sustainable, because that's why I started with the first slideshow I did. That's the foundation. You kind of, in the world we live in, you got to get that base of like economic viability. But once you have that base established, I think that kind of falls away as a priority. I think, there've been studies and whatever, it's like, once you start making more money than you need to survive, meet your base needs, there's no correlation with contentment. So, that one flies in the face of a lot of our economic, values, this idea of utility and ever-increasing utility. But yeah, I think the philosophy of trying to identify and practice sufficiency, like what is enough, is hard, but it has such rewards, because then you can start, once you accept that what you have is enough, then you can start focusing on the, ecologically and socially enriching part, which I think is actually where we find meaning and purpose in life. So yeah, just to take that rant a little farther here, what is efficiency? I studied math and physics in undergrad, so I learned, the technical definition, which is useful work performed over the total energy used. You think of the efficiency of your car, right? And the total energy in the gas, how much useful work you get out of that, determines your efficiency. So but we use it more broadly, right? In the farming sense, it's more like progress toward a goal over the expenditure of resources you use to get there. And conventionally, that goal is defined as yield or profit, right? Those are the goals in conventional economics. The resources are time and money. So you want to have as much yield and profit as possible with as little time and money spent. That's, and I think we all have that ingrained in us so deep, like that's just in there. Like even if you're like cynical of it, it's still in there. So I would challenge us to look at what actually matters, I think, which the goal is quality of life, right? And whatever that means to you, but that's the goal. Yield and profit might play a part in that, but they certainly don't define that. And what are the resources? Well, that's the natural capital of our planet that is finite and precious. So that's what we want to minimize the expenditure of. So yeah, looking at efficiency, this is the old farmhouse that we spent time like painting and restoring and planting flowers around. And how much yield or profit did that bring us? Nothing. How much time and money do we spend on that? Like more than, we wanted to probably. And yet that created a quality of life that I think has led to people wanting to work on the farm being a more beautiful place, and ultimately a more profitable place. So yeah, just rethinking that efficiency. What is the economic value of this barn swing we installed? Arguably that's distracting the workers from being productive, right? But on the contrary, I think it's, this is, efficiency. That's, taking the time to turn that eggplant with a nose on it into a smiley face was, the pleasure that brought the crew was well worth it. That's, quality of life. I'm being cheeky, but I think you get the idea. Here's the essential question, I guess, that I'm getting at, and this is from Holistic Design, Alan Savory and others. How do you want your life to be? And that's a big question that I invite you to take home and reflect on. But what life do you want to live? And do you want to be, chasing weeds into the ground? All the things we do in the name of those other economic values, might not be the life we actually want to live. So here's some more highly inefficient things we do that bring a lot to the farm. This is a community carrot harvest. This might be like the least efficient way to harvest carrots, is invite all your customers and their children of all ages to come pick carrots with you. Because it's just total chaos and delightful, and everyone takes home carrots as payment for their time when really they probably slowed it all down. But it's just a really fun day and a great way for the community to celebrate the farm and to celebrate the harvest of the fall. Education is a big effort here now, but also try to do on-farm education for other farmers, for the community, for our customers. That doesn't bring in money. Sometimes we charge for workshops, but it's definitely not a profitable venture. But it connects people to the farm, and builds that community, which is worth so much more than money. We partner with the local Gleaners Club. They come when we have extra, crops to harvest, and they take them to a local food bank. We do a lot of food donations directly ourselves as well, anything extra. We have community meals as a crew. We take turns cooking for and try to celebrate our harvests. And we have dedicated time at these meals to share gratitude, share what we're grateful for about what we're doing and what we're experiencing in. And then we have celebratory, public events too. We have live music and burger nights, just to try to, this all comes from my doing that work of like, how do I want my life to be? I want to live in a community that celebrates each other and the land and the work that brings us food. So yeah, here's our most precious crop, right? Yeah. So this is the crew this year. I love them all. Grew very close with them this year. Very grateful for them. And I want to talk just a little bit about part of the life I want to live, the farm I want to create is not based on hierarchical sort of power structures. So this is a horizontal labor management that we implemented this year for the first time. That went awesome, and I'm really excited about. So, like I said, everybody's an apprentice, full-time. They live on the farm, provide housing, room and board, a stipend, and education. And these are sort of our main four manager roles: field production, in charge of all the planting and harvesting and row covering, all that kind of stuff. Wash and pack manager for our wholesale deliveries. Wash and pack manager for our CSA harvests, which are on the farm, and then a greenhouse and market manager. And basically all of our entire crew cycled through managing each of these roles. And you'll notice that there's always two people on each role. The first person is, everyone's on it for 2 months, and when somebody moves on to the role, they're trained by the person who's already been on it for a month. So basically, I had a lot of work to do up front, that first month to train everybody. But after that, they're training each other. And it's sort of this wonderful evolution of, everybody passing on the techniques that they've developed, not just following by rote the protocols that I hand down. So this worked really well. It got really great buy-in from the crew because in the past, I've had just a field manager who's in charge of everybody, and everybody else just kind of like sits on their heels and waits to be told what to do. Well, now, even when somebody's not the field manager, they know they're going to become the field manager later, so they're paying attention. And they're like, oh, how are you doing that? And like, why are you doing that? So it just really jacked up the educational value, I think, of this experience, and everyone was just, really present and invested through it all. So I'm excited to, tweak it and continue it in the future. Here they are again, because I love them so much. And here they are. This photo is special to me because I was away, I was out of town, and they, of their own volition, took this ridiculous photo and sent it to me. So I felt connected. And it's special not just because they just installed that entire plot of beautifully mulched and wood chipped beds, but because they're all being like so goofy, and they're smiling like this after spreading over 30 cubic yards of material on those beds. So that was just, made my heart warm, like they were having a good time. For more rants, check out my book. Happy to answer some questions. Thank you. Yes.
Do you use fertilizers? And what fertilizers?
Yeah, do we use fertilizers? What fertilizers? Yes, sometimes we do, depending on the cover crops that were planted beforehand. and the needs of a crop. So we apply fertilizers according to a soil test and according to the crop that's going in. So that we're sure we're not over applying. When we do apply, it's typically just a little bit in the hole as we transplant. Or sometimes if we're adding more mulch on top of the bed, we'll apply the fertilizer first and then mulch over it. And that's our incorporation of the cover crops so that it doesn't just get wet and vaporize. We're certified organic, so we use, I think mostly it's a mix of blood meal, feather meal, and alfalfa meal. That's a custom blend I make because those three have different release rates so that we get a little quick boost with the blood meal, slower with the feather meal, and even slower with the alfalfa meal. And those are typically for the long season, heavier feeding crops, cucurbits and solanaceae and stuff, and brassicas. We don't need phosphorus at this point because our phosphorus is a little high, not as high as some of those on the chart that was shown, but we have enough phosphorus probably for the next couple of years before we have to apply any more of that. Sometimes we'll add a little potassium sulfate, just organic, potassium sulfate. All right, where does the name of your farm come from? Oh, thank you for asking. Frith is an old English word, comes from the root of friend. It's a word that means sanctuary or kinship. It's also the name of my great-granddad's farm in England. So, yeah, thank you. How do you keep track of where everything is planted? Yes, I didn't show we have a Google spreadsheet for the crop plan. Basically every row of the spreadsheet is a bed in the field. So all of that is pretty carefully planned out, this time of year over the winter. And yeah, that includes, that has all the information basically. And then the great thing about it being a Google sheet, I can share that with the entire crew. I really believe in transparency, so basically all the farm records and plans are on Google Sheets, which I share with the entire crew. And they can refer to them throughout the season and update them as needed. So yeah, that is very planned out. And then it's easy to rotate because all our plots are the same, number of beds. We have a lot of bindweed. Can you talk to that weed and whether the tarps and other no-till practices you mentioned would kill this weed? Yeah, I had a little bit of bindweed. So I can't speak to bindweed infestation because we had just a bit and we tarped it and it didn't totally kill it, but it was weak, so we just ended up digging out the rhizomes, by hand. If you had a whole field of that probably wouldn't be feasible. So maybe you just got to tarp it for as long as it takes to smother it. I'm not sure what tillage-based organic growers would do. Would they just till it to smithereens? Because my experience is it likes being tilled. It just sprouts more. So yeah, I wonder what other farmers do, outside the no-till world. But basically, tarping will kill everything eventually because, things can't grow without light. So I don't know how long. I haven't experimented with that with bindweed, whether it would take more than a whole season. I don't know. But yeah, no silver bullet there. Sorry, I haven't experienced that beyond a little bit. What soil tests do you take and how often? We do a soil test every fall, and it's just a basic, or I guess they call it comprehensive soil test through the University of Maine. It's just an $18 test. We test every plot independently on the farm. So that's 16 plots plus 5 high tunnels. We do 21 soil tests every fall. So that's why I don't do a more expensive one. But basically I'm just looking, I like to track the organic matter. I like to look for just major imbalances with macronutrients, micronutrients, and pH. And that's, a nice way to do that, just once a year. And then based on those soil tests is how we'll fertilize those plots the next year, so that we're just applying what's needed. over-fertilizing is just as bad or maybe worse than under-fertilizing. You know, you can produce really like top-heavy plants, super lush-looking, but they have no root system and are really tasty to pests. So yeah, dialing that in is important. Do you measure Brix levels of your plants? If so, what trends have you noticed, in particular the relationship with pests? I do not measure Brix levels aside from eating everything, which is, again, that intuitive measurement. But no, I don't get quantitative with that. Basically, yeah, I see pests as a symptom of inadequate soil life. So yeah, I'm really paying attention. If we do have pests, then what does that soil need right there? Probably needs better coverage, probably needs more cover crops. Chances are it doesn't have a pH or macronutrient issue because we are soil testing and addressing those. But yeah, usually when it happens, I know it's probably going to happen because maybe the soil was starting to show through, but I skimped and didn't put more mulch on. And or yeah, maybe I hadn't grown cover crops there in a couple of years, so the soil's just kind of getting tired. So yeah, I usually know why that's happening. In planting your hedgerows, how much and what type of consideration do you give to interactions between the perennials and the annual crops? Example, nitrogen fixation, deep root sister brother crops, etc. Yeah, I guess I love thinking about that stuff, but I didn't, gosh, this was 5 years ago when I planned those. I definitely paid attention to crop height, which is maybe reflective somewhat of the root system. But yeah, I was mostly concerned with crop height, plant height for the perennials, flower period, and also selecting ones that are not aggressive spreaders, since they were right in my plots. I don't want rhizomatous spreaders or vigorous self-seeders that can become weed problems. So those were the main things I looked for, and then it was just kind of like a little bit just like throwing paint at the canvas of like, oh, I think that would look good next to that one, and so yeah, there's so much you can dig into with like how to design your perennial hedgerows. One thing I would do differently, which is maybe good to point out, I would not combine the woody perennials with the herbaceous perennials as I did, because herbaceous perennials leave a whole lot of residues, which ideally would get knocked down or mowed so that they grow up fresh the next year. And you can't mow them with the woody perennials in there, so we end up having to cut those out by hand. So I would do that differently, maybe like a strip of woody perennials with herbaceous perennials on the sides. How much do the community events and hospitality offerings contribute to the economic resiliency of the farm? Directly, not much at all. If you look at, the bottom line, the revenue from those events is probably less than the revenue we would get if we devoted that time to growing more vegetables. Indirectly, it's huge. Like, that is our community. Like, what's the value of a community that likes and supports you? Like, stick a number on that. Yeah, that's the meaning of life. Like, what is that worth? Like, but also economically, that's valuable too. Like, if the farm were to hit hard times, all these people have like formative memories of, visiting the farm and good times with their families there. They know us personally. That's a safety net for us too. So, yeah. Do the apprentices return season after season, or is there a new crop, each year? Yeah, that's a great question. So it's actually kind of a problem, because if people want to come back, which they do, it changes the dynamic for the next year, right? My whole horizontal management, no hierarchy, there's a culture there. If someone has seniority, is coming back, like everyone just kind of sits on their heels and asks them all the questions. So I'm actually leaning toward a new crop every year to really encourage people to step into that role of manager and not just to defer to someone else. That's hard though, because they're amazing people, and if they want to come back, it's like, it's kind of a weird problem to have. But in the past, I have had people back. One person stayed as many as 5 years. But yeah, I mean, I'm also aware of part of their compensation is education. So the longer they stay, chances are the less value that is to them. So then, you know, it has to be more and more monetary compensation, which also creates a difference between them and the other employees. So yeah, I don't think there's a right answer, but next year I decided it's a whole new crop. How did you get through your first year? What did you grow? What products were you able to bring to market in that first year? Yeah, first year was tough. It's definitely like working every waking hour, living in a condemnable house with no water or electricity. Yeah, just a wood stove to keep from freezing. My mattress froze to the floor because of all the condensation under it. Like, I didn't realize that was a thing, but yeah, I would just like sleep in my clothes and down coat in a sleeping bag. And anyway, that's not what you're asking. So yeah, the first year I grew on 1 acre, or maybe just under an acre. I had 31 CSA members. I got all those through posting flyers, having a website, and soliciting an article from our local periodical that goes free to every single mailbox in town. And they did a little piece on the farm front page, new farm in town accepting CSA members. So that was great free advertising. And that's, yeah, probably how I got half the members was just from that little newspaper article. But yeah, 31 members, you know, that's not economically sustainable, but this was year one. It was building towards something. I anticipated that and had enough loan money to carry me through to get to year 2 where it broke even, and then year 3 was you know, profitable. But the crops, it was everything. Yeah, I was growing 40 different vegetables. I did 1 farmer's market, the CSA. I also started with all sorts of livestock. I was very full of vim and vigor. So I had, yeah, pigs, sheep, meat chickens, turkeys, layers, kind of going for all of it at once, which in hindsight maybe was too much. But yeah, that didn't get me through the first year profitably, but it was establishing a customer base and a viable business plan that then blossomed later. Last question, all right. What do you do to keep your vegetation from coming in from the field edge? Yeah, that's a perennial problem, so to speak. Yeah, we have quackgrass, which really creeps in. So, you know, I've tried different things. Landscape fabric strips, I don't really like that because it's plastic and it degrades and things start growing through it eventually anyway. So what we do now is little mini windrows of wood chips around the perimeter. So it's, you know, a couple feet wide, a foot tall, little just mound of wood chips that'll pretty much last a year and a half or so. If anything, if quackgrass starts to grow through it, it just pulls right out so easily because it's so loose. But then we have to redo that windrow every year or two. Thanks all.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. We're going to head into another break until about 3:15, but I did want to note that there's a brew